Welcome to a morbid edition of Dolphins In Depth, a podcast provided to you by the Miami Herald. I am your host, Omar Kelly, Miami Herald columnist, and joining me right now is the illustrious Barry Jackson. Barry was a very disappointing, I got to look up the score because the score really didn't even matter that much, was a disappointing 31-10 loss to the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night in front of a national audience. We'll get into why it was traumatizing, but in the game, it really didn't seem like any level of the team was ready to perform on the level that they needed to in order to take down the reigning AFC East champions, the Buffalo Bills. That was probably as dominant a performance as I've seen. It even exceeded last year's first game beatdown. And they did this on the road. And it clearly sends a statement to the Miami Dolphins and all of the AFC. Hey, this division, if not the entire AFC, is still going to go through us. So you better recognize because daddy is home. And quite disappointing loss, Barry.
Yeah, to me, this was the most disappointing loss of the Mike McDaniel regime because year 3 was supposed to be the year where they at least equaled the Bills or surpassed the Bills as part of this rebuild. And for them to be really uncompetitive in the game and to produce so little offensively against the Bills defense that was highly vulnerable, lost Terrell Bernard, weren't without Teron Johnson. They've obviously moved on from Tre'Davious White, their top corner from a couple of years ago. They moved on from both their starting safeties, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. They lost Matt Milano, one of the best linebackers in the league, during August. So against this depleted
the starter
Bills
that
defense,
replaced him suffered an injury in the game. Let's continue to add to the laundry list, Barry.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think it was, and again, I want to put our concern for Tua aside. So let's put that aside for a minute because that's paramount. I thought it was a disgraceful performance, and to me, it showed all of my concerns that I expressed to you on the podcast throughout August, where I said I wouldn't be surprised if they were 7-10 team. To me, this was a 6 seed that clearly regressed. They're simply not good enough interior of the line on both sides of the ball. Once again, last night, run defense pulverized at times, giving up more than 4 yards per carry. No pass rush at all, no sacks at all last night. I know Chop Robinson had a good moment, but simply not good enough. The receivers cannot get separation other than Waddle and Hill. We are sitting here, Omar, with receivers who, frankly, should either be 6th guys on a team or shouldn't necessarily even be in the league that you're trying to get by with as your 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Why are they throwing to Grant Dubose on a key 3rd down early in the game? Why does Robbie Chosen not know the playbook? Why is he even here? I mean, there's just, to me, so many shortcomings on this team. I went into the season, as you know, thinking it's a fringe playoff team. If they're without Tua for 4 to 6 weeks, I think it's unlikely they're a playoff team at all. So I just think it was grim last night because I think we can acknowledge now. And again, this is not based only on last night. This is based on the fact that they have now been outscored by 131 points in their last 8 games against playoff teams. Does that look to you like a Super Bowl contender? Does it look to you like a division contender? This is a pretty average team, maybe a little bit above average when they're with Tua. It's a fringe wild card team, but any expectation that they've built this into some power that can compete for a Super Bowl, to me, is laughable, and that was confirmed again last night, unfortunately.
Yeah, I even before we get to the Tua injury, because clearly that's an elephant in the room that has to be discussed. I was pleasantly surprised and pleased by Devon Achane, the showing that he performed. I watched him in all of warmups, and this guy barely moved. Made me wonder and have concern whether or not he's just going to be healthy enough to play or if he's going to be a decoy. I thought 96 rushing yards on 22 attempts, 7 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. That's a phenomenal performance. Probably performances when you talk about fantasy, and I don't talk about fantasy, but just delivering fantasy numbers, that was a pleasant surprise. But just as you pointed out, Barry, as depleted and watered down as Buffalo's defense was, because they also had to purge their roster to get salary cap compliant, and they're in a rebuilding stage now. fortunately for them, when you have an elite quarterback, it's a lot easier to rebuild with new wide receivers and new secondary and new cornerbacks. And I was thoroughly disappointed at how Miami could not attack their depleted and inexperienced secondary. That was not the game plan I expected. I know it's a Thursday night game and short week of preparation, no practice week. But I'm sorry, Mike McDaniel's smart enough to know he should have had that game plan done and maybe worked on the week before they began the preparation for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
3 catches for 24 yards for Tyreek, 4 for 41 for Waddle. That's unacceptable. And I don't care if the Bills are playing 2 high safeties. I don't care if the Bills are doing anything creative. Those numbers are not acceptable when so much of your cap space is allocated to the wide receiver position. And I know they can blame having nobody competent as a 3rd or 4th receiver, but to me, you still have to find ways to get them the ball. I know McDaniel tried to be creative by getting the ball to Waddle and to Tyreek on running plays. Waddle obviously last night gained only 4 on his, but there just wasn't enough creativity. There wasn't, and usually looking for Hill is not the issue. They look for Hill enough. They didn't last night, and I think they failed themselves in not looking for a more competent 3rd receiver once Craycraft was injured and once they determined that Odell couldn't start the season, Omar.
How many do you want? Wait a minute. How many do you want? What more do you want from them?
I don't want a developmental project in Grant Dubose as your only waiver claim. I want an established veteran 3rd receiver on the roster.
You have one. His name's Odell Beckham, and he's not healthy. You have another one in Eric Uzukama, who you drafted early, didn't develop.
Odell was out. I'm talking about once they knew Odell would miss the start of the season. You can't have your only waiver claim be Grant Dubose. You need an experienced, better receiver.
Obviously, they added that in Robbie Chosen. They added Robbie Chosen's resume.
Not the option because he ran the wrong route last night.
You don't know that. I don't know that. You don't know that. It was clearly a misfire. Let's not blame every single Tua misfire on, the receiver ran the wrong route. I'm not saying that he didn't, but we don't know that. Here, I don't, and you know how I feel about the receiver position. You know how I feel about the depth of this roster. I have more of a concern about the offensive line and the defensive line, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you re-sign Eric Uzukama. You sign Chosen to your practice squad. You claim the wide receiver. Like, what more did you want, Barry? What more do you want from me? Chris Greer is saying, and I'm not. And then you've got the young rookie who's hurt, Malik Washington. I mean, okay, hell, they played Tanner Connor receiver last night. I don't know if there's anything you could do there. And we're talking about a number 3 and realistically a number 4 because Jonnu Smith is the real number 3. But that shouldn't be the reason why you're not getting any productivity from Waddle and Tyreek. I'm sorry. They're like, was Tyreek, they just said, Tyreek, you're distracted this week. Let's focus on other players. Like, where was all this movement from Tyreek? Where were the plays?
Right. That was rare instances where they underutilized him. One of the rare instances last night, which you rarely see with them, where they underutilized Tyreek. And just to make my position clear on 3rd, 4th, 5th wide receivers, I don't blame how the Dolphins handled it in the offseason, although you can question whether they should have signed Odell to begin with if they knew that a procedure could stretch his absence well into October. So you could question that. Generally, though, I have no great criticism of what the Dolphins did at receiver this offseason because you saw Craycraft develop. My issue is once they knew Craycraft was injured, once they knew Beckham would not start the season, go out and find the best possible veteran receiver to be your 3rd receiver when the season starts. Don't waste a precious spot on the 53 on a developmental guy in Grant Dubose who's not ready for the moment. Don't keep going back to Robbie Chosen, who clearly wasn't ready for the moment last night. Find somebody better. You've got $23 million in cap space. Try to trade for a veteran receiver from another team. See if Michael Thomas is able to play. There are options out there that you could pursue rather than saying Grant Dubose is the best option on earth to be our number 3 receiver early in the season.
Cheap developmental project. Young, cheap. But listen,
as a common chance.
Here. Okay, we're lost in the weeds arguing about wide receiver. Let's table that because that wasn't the reason that they lost. they lost because Tua threw 3 interceptions. One not his fault. One we don't know if it was Robbie Chosen running the wrong route or the quarterback misfiring. And then the third, pressure. Tyron Armstead's not out there as your left tackle. I think Rob Jones was replaced by Lester Cotton, and pressure was coming from that leakage from the left side. Tua's getting sacked. He hurls a ball to the sideline, thinking maybe he threw it far enough to get it out of bounds, intercepted, run back for a touchdown. That was really the nail in the coffin. And then after that, Barry, it just became panic time for everybody, including Tua, who scrambles to gain a 4th down conversion in the red zone. Clearly a moment where he's trying to put his team on his back and carry them to a comeback like he did the previous week. However, he runs his body into DeMar Hamlin, crumbles to the ground, head bounces on the ground like it was a basketball. And then we've got, the frozen hands situation, which the minute everybody saw that, especially after 2 years ago, seeing it in a Thursday night game in Cincinnati, there became less of a focus on the game and the outcome and more of a focus on Tua's health and his NFL future. We talked to Mike McDaniel after the game. We talked to him this morning in a post-game press conference. And the one word that I would use to describe Mike McDaniel is frazzled. Somber would be the other word. I think he cried today again. I'm not necessarily certain if tears were shed, but he was clearly emotional. And the focus of the discussion was, folks, let's stop worrying about football. Let's stop worrying about a timeline for Tua. Let's stop talking about his future in the NFL, whether or not he should retire. And let's just let him settle and not put any pressure on him so that we can move forward and understand where he is and where the doctors are with this concussion, Barry. What did you take away from that press conference?
Well, to me, the most interesting thing, aside from the most important thing, which is Tua's health and the fact that he's alert this morning, talking teammates, that's the best news. But the other big takeaway from McDaniel on Friday is that Skylar Thompson's their guy. I asked him specifically, are you and Chris Greer going to consider adding a veteran quarterback who can be your starter while Tua heals or can compete with Skylar? And McDaniel couldn't have been more clear. Skylar Thompson is their next guy. They're going to add a guy, but it's going to be a depth guy. So all this thought about Tannehill and anyone else who might be out there trading for Garoppolo, trading for Mac Jones, to me, it's a waste of time if McDaniel was indeed being honest with us, and he typically is honest with us. So they're looking for a backup to compete with Tim Boyle, a guy who can be a third quarterback if needed, emergency, possibly a number 2 if he beats out Tim Boyle. To me, if that's all you're looking for, plucking Mike White from Buffalo's practice squad would make sense, because for all of his weaknesses, he's smart, he knows the system, he would be a good fit. I'm not sure who else you would suggest for a pure backup role. Now, do I think this is a good move? I do not. Right. Yeah, he'd be better. I don't think it's a good move, but I'm not going to criticize him for sticking with Skylar because it's not like there are great options out there. Tannehill was a diminished player last year, and even though I've advocated at least giving him a call to see where his mind is at, the idea of bringing in Tannehill, who struggled badly against the pass rush last year and wasn't very good last year, to fill in for maybe 4 games. First of all, it'd probably be only 1 or 2 because he wouldn't be ready to start immediately. So I'm not sure how much that does. The question is, in this 4-game stretch coming up, how many can they win with Skylar? At Seattle, Tennessee, at New England, at Indianapolis, if Tua should miss 4 games, and including that October 13th bye, 4 games plus the bye. So if Tua's out for 4 or 5 weeks, which is not unrealistic, Kim Bokamper said he expects him to miss 4 to 6 games. The question is, how many of those games can they win with Skylar Thompson? Maybe 1. They're likely going to be looking at maybe 1-4, 2-3 when Tua comes back.
Hold on, Barry. Let's take a TO, okay? Let's take a timeout here. While I will acknowledge to you, and you and I have both watched Skylar in practice, there are highs, there are lows. There are instances where he didn't seem ready to handle the moment. And this is going back to his rookie season. That is a different quarterback than what we're seeing now. Now, the question is, with a full week of preparation, with a full game plan of these are what highlights Skylar's strengths, this is what he can do, we don't know what he's capable of. Keep in mind, and I'm not I don't want to compare him to Brock Purdy, but Skylar was chosen before Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy wasn't supposed to become Brock Purdy. He did because an injury happened and he rose to the occasion. Skylar was a competent quarterback, not competent. He was a good quarterback at Kansas State before getting injured. Does he have all the tools to be an NFL starting quarterback? That question's a little bit on the fringe. My hope, belief, thought is that we can get a little Matt Moore out of him, where the style is feast or famine. There's a gunslinger approach. Well, if I have a gunslinger approach, wouldn't it be a great thing to have good weapons to actually fire with my gunslinger approach? He's got Jalen Waddle, he's got Tyreek Hill, he's got Jonnu Smith, he's got Devon Achane. What better weaponry would you want for a guy like Skylar to come into this situation? I am being slightly optimistic because I do like the gunslinger approach. I need a gunslinger. So Skylar is that. Are we going to let him sling it, Barry?
Well, Skylar's one win was a 9-6 win, which was obviously a critical win to help get them into the playoffs, but a game where they didn't score any touchdowns. Knowing how they've struggled offensively for 2 weeks, with Tua being the quarterback for the vast majority of those 2 games, I just don't have much optimism that they're going to generate a lot of offense with Skylar, a quarterback. I don't have a lot of confidence in it. I think the schedule gives them a chance because you're not facing playoff teams. You're facing Seattle, you're facing Indy, you're facing Tennessee, you're facing New England. So the schedule gives them a chance over this 4-game stretch to at least stay close to 500. Maybe they come out of it 3-3 at 500. Maybe they come out 2-4. But if they were playing a more consequential group of teams, then I wouldn't give them any chance at all. So to me, they're saved by the soft spot in the schedule. But that means when the schedule gets hard, that's when Tua in this offense will have to start being productive again. I want to remove this illusion, by the way, about this being such a great offense, because they've been a great offense, obviously, against bad teams. But against good teams, they have not been a great offense going back to last year. And that was painfully evident last night before Tua left the game. And I don't know how to solve it at this point. But it was clear to me, because their defense was diminished, that the offense would have to be a consistent juggernaut this year. We didn't see it for the 6.5 quarters that Tua's played. And that's why I think for the first time, I'm a lot more pessimistic than you. It's been that way, Omar, for the last 2 months. Oftentimes in the past, I've been more optimistic than you, but I am distinctly more pessimistic than you, because not only did I see the shortcomings in this roster before the season, but those shortcomings have been very evident the first 2 games. They're just not as good offensively. They have no number 3, number 4, or 5 receiver who can get open. The tight end play has been disappointing. The interior of the offensive line isn't very good. They can't stop the run nearly as well as they did last year. Benito Jones was blown off the ball, I saw twice last night, when Christian Wilkins likely wouldn't have been. And I don't see a team as good as the one that won 11 games last year before folding down the stretch. That's why my expectations for the rest of the season, whenever Tua comes back, are low at this point. And again, I know I sound like Debbie Downer today, but I'm just trying to be straight with how I feel.
Yeah. I think Tua's health and his status, everything hinges. As I wrote my column in the Miami Herald app from last night's game, that injury, which was the worst case scenario of anything happening for this season, makes you reconsider everything. Makes you reconsider the whole last 5 years. It makes you reconsider the contract extension. Makes you reconsider Tua and the weight loss, because he suffered the injury trying to be this athletic scrambling quarterback, which I always thought to myself, doesn't that put you? There's a reason why I'm adamant and strongly against scrambling quarterbacks, and you know why, Barry? Because their eggs can get scrambled. And here we go. Our eggs got scrambled. Now the question is, how do you rebound? How do you respond? And Mike McDaniel, I give him a lot of praise and a lot of props, because he said something that was, and I know it was true, was so transparent today in the press conference. He talked about how, he knows what it's like to, he dreads coming into a dejected media contingent. I thought, hey, that's because we are the first line of defense for the fan base. So he dreads that. he knows the fans who spend their hard-earned money. He knows they're upset, they're disappointed, they're in a state of panic, they're in dismay. Mike McDaniel's been that fan. That's how he got to the NFL. He used to ride his bike for miles to go to Denver Broncos training camp practice before he lost his cap and his mom fell in love, and then he became an equipment manager, ball boy, equipment manager, right? All technicalities before he started growing up with Kyle Shanahan. Barry, this. Are we hitting the panic button?
Yeah, but I did in August. I told you this was a 6 seed that had regressed. It was a fringe playoff team. Now I view them as something even worse. It's just not a team that's equipped to either be a playoff team or certainly not make a run in postseason.
I don't know.
And that was the case before Tua's injury. All of their weaknesses were on display last time. You can't just gloss over a team that's outscored by 131 points in their last 8 games against playoff teams. How Pollyannish do you have to be to gloss that over and consider this to be a good team? I mean, people should have no illusions. This is a decent team that with Tua probably could win 8 or 9 games. Maybe they're 7-10, maybe they're 10-7. I don't know. But to have any illusions after watching last night pre-Tua's injury and after watching their last 7 games against playoff teams other than the Dallas game, how could anyone consider this a serious threat to Kansas City, to Baltimore, to any of the powerhouses, or to Buffalo?
That was last year's team. Let's not lump anything in. I like the leadership.
And this team is worse. This team is worse.
Not from a leadership standpoint. And Mike McDaniel talks about how leadership.
In the one area, well, I say this. In the one area where they were supposed to be better, tight end, they haven't been. I mean, where has been the Jonnu Smith package? I know he had some impact last night. Julian Hill has not played well. He's whiffed on blocks. Durham Smythe obviously had 2 drops in the first game. I would at least think the tight end should be better. And I would expect them to be better, because that to me is the one area of the team where they're clearly better. But they're worse at receiver without Odell. They're worse in the offensive line. They're worse on the defensive line. It's about the same at linebacker. Jordan Brooks had 1 good play in coverage last night, but don't tell me that Jordan Brooks is 20 times the player Jerome Baker is. And obviously, they're just not getting enough pass rushing against Buffalo, and they didn't against good teams. Now, maybe Beckham and Chubb and Tua come back in late October, and this gets to be a 10-11 win team again, and at least they'll be a wild card team. To me, that is the ceiling. That's the best case scenario, and it's why I'm not going to bury them, because they're missing 2 really good players. Plus,
it sounds like you're burying them, Barry. It sounds like dirt's being shoveled on them. It certainly. I give them a chance because of Chubb. I need to see how they respond in the next 2 weeks. I need to see how they respond to adversity. That's a true test of good team, good leadership. Yeah, I give them and they responded well to adversity the first week. I don't know what Skylar can be. I don't know how much Devon Achane can carry this offense. I don't know if some defensive lineman on the practice squad is going to be able to step up, get called up. And that has been a surprise to me, that they have not called up anybody in the first couple of games. It's very clear as day when Calais Campbell is not on the field. They need defensive line help, like how they haven't addressed this. Now you've got 2 injuries on the offensive line. Teron Armstead is hurt again. He's battling a shoulder injury. They got him pulled from the game. Mike McDaniel does not know the severity of it, but it doesn't seem to be season ending. Okay, Teron already doesn't practice. How much can he play with a bad wing? I don't know, but here we are again with another Teron Armstead injury, and then Robert Jones suffered an injury in that game and got replaced by Lester Cotton. I am not a huge Lester Cotton skeptic, but I can tell you he's not an NFL starter. But here you are, because you chose not to go with Jack Driscoll. I'm not ready to hit the panic button yet, Barry, but I'm figuring out the location. And to me, the starting point is, where is Tua? Where and will he come back? And Mike McDaniel made a very important point. He said, let's not focus on the timeline. Let's not stress about his return. His focus needs to be a father, be a dad this weekend. Let's move from there. But anybody with common sense knows that, people have to start reconsidering life choices when you see, is he going the Trent Green route of football right now, where anytime he gets hit, suffers a physical hit, it's possibly going to lead to a concussion. We don't have these answers, Barry. I mean, literally, he hasn't even met with a neurologist today. He's going to have multiple meetings with a neurologist so we can understand what's going on there. And everybody's a medical expert, but it's safe to say Roger Goodell was in attendance last night. He watched the game. He watched the incident. I think there's a ton of symmetry with Tua colliding with Damar Hamlin, a guy who literally lost his life, stopped breathing on a football field. Those two collided, and we are where we are. You got to worry about safety, and you got to send the right message to mothers that playing this sport, your child is safe. We will protect them, because the worst case scenario is, okay, Tua sits out a month, he's back on the field, and then it happens again. Then where are we?
Oh, well, I don't want to start thinking about that. From my conversations with neurologists that I had last year, neither said that another concussion would need to make Tua retire. They both said that if Tua had another concussion, which happened obviously on Thursday night, that they would be cautious in terms of waiting a little bit longer for him to return than a player getting that kind of concussion for the first time in their career. But I've read nothing at all from a medical expert saying Tua needs to retire. Now, could he miss 4, 5, 6 weeks? Absolutely. But this whole Tua retiring thing, I just think is such a waste of time. It's not based on science. Why are people speculating on Twitter who don't have medical degrees telling the man what to do with his life? It's his decision, and I got news for you. Anyone saying it's time for Tua to retire has no business giving that opinion, in my opinion, because they have no medical information to base it on. There's not a single neurologist who has said publicly that he needs to retire, and so you're just spitballing with a lack of information. So give it a rest, people. Don't say Tua should retire. It's his decision, and his decision alone with his family. And by the way, for those who say Tua was considering retirement when this happened after Cincinnati and Green Bay, that's not a fair characterization. He revealed to ESPN recently that it was his mother who had broached the idea of him retiring, but Tua never had any serious interest in retiring. He wants to play. He would potentially give up $124 million if he doesn't play. So this notion of Tua retiring, I don't know where it's coming from. And to me, it would be stunning if he retired, Omar.
Yeah, Barry, I don't think people understand that he's worked his whole life, and this is his dream. He's living his dream. He's worked his whole life to get here. And then everybody just says, oh, give it up. Give it up for your health. I am not poo-pooing or minimizing concussions. I think they're very serious. But when you talk to former athletes like Channing Crowder or our Hall of Famer Zach Thomas, back in the day, smelling salt, there's a reason why they had smelling salt, because those guys would suffer multiple concussions per game. Their lights would go out and they just smelling salt and go back in the game. Yes, we know more about CT right now, but let's not pretend like Tua plays a contact-driven position. He doesn't. That was a play where should Tua have slidden? Should Tua have lived to play another day? Yes, but the desperation level that he was feeling made him decide to go all out. Unfortunately, it was just a bad choice. Hopefully he continues to make better choices. But for those who are saying, hey, he needs to be retired, I agree with you, Barry. Way premature. Can the man at least sit down and talk to some doctors before he gives up something that he spent his whole life trying to work towards? And
right. And one thing I want to add, I've asked neurologists. Oh, absolutely, Omar. I've asked neurologists, is there a magic number where you get to with concussions where it's just clearly prudent to retire? They said there is no magic number. One of the neurologists from Boston told me last year that the point at which a player needs to seriously consider retirement is when routine hits start regularly causing concussions. So the question was, how severe in your mind was the Hamlin hit? Was that a routine hit? Was it something that would cause a concussion in the majority of players? You could make the case either way.
Yeah, you certainly can. You see a lot of physical, brutal hits in the NFL, and that just happened to be one of them. Tua's gonna experience a couple of more. Hopefully, they don't necessarily involve their head. I did find one thing extremely interesting about Mike McDaniel's press conference this morning, and I'm a big proponent for the Guardian caps. The use of Guardian caps, they wear them in practice, but they don't take them to games, and players have this whole mindset that, oh, it's heavy, it's not manly enough to play football. I can't have rubber on my hard head. When I collide, you must hear the clanging of sounds. Okay, just dumb. And I've always thought that this is just dumb, and maybe the bravado of the sport maybe needs a reality check. But when Mike McDaniel was asked, will you consider encouraging Tua to play with the Guardian cap? And I'm a professional reader of body language because this is what we do. He's sitting on the Zoom and he's going, yes, yes. And his answer, he didn't want to be adamant about it, but this is a man who admits he cares about Tua like his family. And if there's anything that Tua might possibly do to prevent him having his head rattled every time it hits the ground, maybe a guardian cap would be a good idea. So I did find that very interesting. And truthfully, that's what this should be about. Let's focus on Tua getting healthy. Let's focus on him not having migraines. Let's focus on the concussion symptoms and light sensitivity to lessen down. Let's focus on the brain healing. And then when we start to maybe get back to football, let's talk about precautions that we can take, changing the cap, because there is a special cap for quarterbacks, special helmet for quarterbacks Tua chose not to wear. You can go the guardian route, which is now allowed in the NFL. I don't think there is a single player wearing a guardian cap in the game, but that's just bravado of athletes. I personally believe, and have had this stance for 10 years, when I first discovered guardian caps, this should be mandatory for every player. And who cares? You could paint a logo on it. The reality is the NFL is a scary game. I have a 22-year-old son. When the question came up, and I've always stood on this, will he play football? My answer would always be hell to the no, because I know way too much. And props to every other parent who wants their child or allows their child to play it. But this sport is for crazy people. Now we love it. We absolutely obsess about it. But if you choose to play this sport and go that route, it's because you are absolutely out of your rocker. Now we enjoy it, but it's much like watching the gladiators kill each other in Rome. It's a gladiator sport, but should you be playing it? Probably not. My best friend brought up this concept, Barry, and I want to approach it to you. If football had never been invented, and today, 2024, you came up with this concept and created this sport and explained it to people, do you think it would pass like the sniff test of what's acceptable? And I know they play rugby without helmets and pads, and it's a difference. It's a very physical sport as well, but this sport makes no sense, Barry.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think it's time for Tua to go to the guardian cap, to take every precaution. There's so many unfortunate things about last night, and obviously, again, our biggest concern is Tua's long-term health. His desire to not slide the way he was taught came from all the right places. He was frustrated by his performance. He wanted to get every possible yard, all admirable qualities, but it was avoidable if he had simply slid the way that he was taught to protect himself. So I'm sure he'll be looking back at this and saying it was avoidable. It's unfortunate all the same. One thing I did want to add about all of this is I don't know why reporters have been asking Mike McDaniel, should Tua continue playing? He's not a medical expert. It's not his place to say. And also at the same time, when McDaniel says, I'm not going to speculate on how long Tua is going to be out because it's unhealthy for Tua to hear that, I think that's, and I love McDaniels, I think it's a little disingenuous, because McDaniel saying, it looks like he'll be out a few weeks is not going to impact Tua's recovery, even though McDaniel says he's been told that any discussion of when Tua could return could have a negative impact. I know McDaniel says that from a good place. He is a good man, but I do think that line is kind of a crutch not to share with us what appears obvious, that he's going to miss some time. And also, one thing which I'll give McDaniel credit for is, obviously, he's not going to have a specific timeline because we don't know when the symptoms are going to go away. And he obviously has to be cleared by an independent neurologist. But all of these big picture questions that McDaniel's getting about, should he continue playing? Is it safe for him to play? I don't know where any of this is coming from. Tua is in concussion protocol. He's very likely going to come back, barring a shocking development or something stunning that neurologists tell him that is unexpected. From all indications, he wants to play. So I don't know why we're wasting all of this time about should Tua retire? Will he retire?
Because it's it's what the networks and the talking heads want. It's what the casual fan who saw the hit and saw the head bobble and saw the hand, they think about, Barry. And that's a natural reaction. I've had that conversation with about 3-4 casual friends. Like, is Tua ever going to play again? Like, let's calm down. Like, is football a dangerous sport? The answer is yes, in all capital letters. Should anybody be playing football? No. The answer is no, in all capital letters. But we do it anyway because we love it, and it's a juggernaut for television and ratings. But is anybody safe in the NFL? No. Not, players suffer concussions all the time, and they're not safe. And half the time they don't report them. Half the time they try to skirt around the fact that they suffered a concussion because they don't want to be part of the protocol. That's just the nature of the game. I talked to Braxton Berrios after the game. Guy's got a black eye. Do you think he he got punched going to a Starbucks, Barry? No, it's from football. And the guy wears a helmet. So it's a dangerous physical game. That's just the realities of it. And if you choose to do it, and Tua chooses to do it and was handsomely rewarded, a contract that pays him $47 million a year. He's got $47 million of a reason to continue to do it. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of this, Barry. What is your concern level for Teron Armstead?
Well, I was heartened by the fact McDaniel said it's probably not a season-ending injury. He expects it back sooner than later. But unfortunately, it's just a continuation with a very good player and a very good man who cannot stay healthy. And right, I mean, we've been there, seen this before, and this is what you get with Teron Armstead. You get 10 to 14 games a season, and you just hope he's able to give the Dolphins that much. I want to quickly ask you about the decision to go with Kendall Lamb. I had no issue with it, even though they drafted Patrick Ball in the second round. Kendall didn't play particularly well, but I think he's earned the opportunity to be next up. With Patrick Paul, there are obviously still some concerns about throwing him in immediately.
Mike said the decision was he didn't want to go. He didn't want to impact Patrick Paul's confidence. That was an extreme situation. His teammates, he didn't want to also alter his teammates' view of him if he'd gone in there and struggled. Now, maybe with a
Kendall Lamb would have to play himself out of the job. Kendall Lamb would have to play himself out of the job, I think, for Patrick Paul to get chance.
I disagree with you. I think a week of preparation with Patrick as the starter would give him that starting spot. They just didn't want to put him in there cold because I'm pretty sure Patrick Paul probably spends the week practicing against Jalen Phillips on the practice squad. So, does he have a comfort level with the plays and the playbook and things of that nature? But he's active, so he should be ready to go. Raheem Mostert missed the game with a chest injury. Devon
Wilson with an oblique.
What'd you say?
Jeff Wilson with an oblique now, so Wilson's out. So they continue to have injuries all across the roster. And with the left side of their line, we'll see if Robert Jones can overcome a shoulder injury or whether they'll need to stick with Lester Cotton at left guard. Isaiah Wynn obviously can't return for another 2 games if he even returns at all this year, which Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel have been non-committal about. So they're going to have to go into Seattle possibly without Armstead, possibly without their starting left guard, and you wish everybody well. But it doesn't look good at this point. I think if they can just survive Skylar starts, get out of it 500, they'll give themselves a fighting chance when Tua presumably returns at some point in mid to late October.
Yeah, and this is a great opportunity for Skylar. You want to solidify yourself as an NFL quarterback. Here's your chance. Here's your opportunity. We'll see how he performs. The Dolphins have the weekend off. Next week, they play against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. I will be there, and we will be there. Dolphins in Depth, leading you up into the week. On that note, enjoy your weekend. Say your prayers and stay safe, everybody.